I was driving home from work and needed to stop by the Red Cross to donate blood, which I do about once every 3 months. After making an appointment, I went in and checked in and waited my turn. They ran my card through the computer and asked all the stupid questions. Well, I guess they weren't really stupid, but I always sat there saying no, 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 until we got through the whole list. I was a 6-gallon donor, so it was almost always the same thing. I was never in the hospital or out of the country, so it was pretty easy for me. The only person I've had sex with in the last 20 years was my wife of 18 years. Yes, we had sex before we got married, just like every other person in the world. Anyway, the questions about sex turned out to be pretty straightforward, too. No STDs, no HIV, or any other sexually transmitted diseases. I knew the nurse always felt uncomfortable asking me all those sex questions, but that was her job, and we went over the usual list. Then she said she would be right back when she checked the updated donor list. She came back and looked at me with her head down. "What's the matter, Mary?" I asked. "Am I low on iron or something else?" She looked at me and asked if I was related to Judy Lawrence. I replied, "Of course, Mary, she's my wife, you know that. What's the problem, Mary?" "Jim, Judy came in this morning to donate blood, but she was turned down." "What's that got to do with me, Mary?" "Jim, I don't know how to say this exactly, but according to her form this morning, she was found to have had sex within the last 3 months with someone who tested positive for HIV. That means that anyone she has had sex with may have contracted the disease and will not be able to donate blood for 12 months. I'm sorry, Jim." "Hold on a second, Mary. Did she just come in here and say that to the Red Cross?" "No, Jim. When someone goes to a doctor or hospital and is found to be a carrier of the virus, they are asked to give the names of people they've had sex with in the last year. This list is confidential, but is provided to the Red Cross so we can keep track of infected blood." "So, Mary, you're saying my beloved wife was on the carrier's list?" "Yes, Jim. The carrier should have contacted his sexual partners and told them he was a carrier so they could see a doctor. But according to your wife's profile, she was never notified." "Who is this carrier who says he had sex with my wife, Mary?" "I'm sorry, Jim. I can't tell you since you didn't have sex with this person. You are the second contact and you will have to find out from your wife. I'm sorry, Jim. I just can't tell you. I hope you understand. Just like I can't mention your name to anyone else." "Mary, we've been friends a long time and I won't insist on it. But what are the chances of me getting infected?" "Jim, the chances of you not being infected are very high. Since this was a second exposure, and I shouldn't tell you this, but, your wife said you were using protection, so that's in your favor, too." I thanked Mary and headed home. What was I going to do? How do I deal with this after 18 years of marriage? We have a daughter who just graduated high school and is in college, but lives at home. What should I say to her? I always thought we had a good marital relationship. We had sex or lovemaking on a regular basis. In fact, we only did it last week. God, I was all over her body that night. Now I might regret it. It was our special night. We went out for dinner and drinks. I remember we got pretty drunk. The sex when we got home was great. I've been trying to remember everything we did. I remember us kissing in the beginning. Damn, love seems so clinical now. God, I must have an STD of the mouth. Then I remembered how she went down on me, too. Then we kissed some more. Damn her for putting our lives on the line, and all for what? I had yet to find out. I needed to calm down. I needed to act like nothing had happened until I knew the son of a bitch's name. That's when the shit would hit the fan. As usual, when I got home, dinner was almost ready. Beth, our daughter, always started it, and my wife usually got home before I did and finished it. It was a kind of family time where we would all sit around and discuss the previous day. We probably ate together at least 4 days a week. Today could prove to be an interesting day. Upon entering the house, I immediately headed to the bathroom to wash my hands. I usually kiss my wife and daughter when I enter the house, but today I wanted to do without, especially with Beth. I didn't even want to kiss her until I knew what was going on. I didn't want to give my daughter a disease. Hell, I was almost paranoid now. We sat down to eat, and Beth started talking about her first weeks at college. She was so excited and talked through the entire dinner. Then she said a friend was picking her up and they were going to the library to study. She asked if we could do the dishes tonight since her girlfriend had already arrived and was waiting for her. I told her to go away and do her own thing. I'll load the dishwasher for her. She really was a good kid. I couldn't help but be proud of her. As soon as Beth left, my demeanor changed. I looked at Judy and asked her how her day had gone. She replied that the day went as normal without saying anything about giving blood or even trying to give blood. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Judy, would you say that the most important thing in a marriage is trust and honesty?" She looked at me strangely and asked, "What's this about, Jim? Why are you asking me a question like that?" "Just answer the question, and I'll explain later," I said. "Okay, I'll play along. Yes, I believe that marriage is built on trust and honesty," she replied. I wanted this to turn out almost like a game. I didn't want her to try to second-guess me, so I told her that today at work, one of the members of our group that always has lunch together asked a question. Do we feel like our wives or husbands will lie to us about important issues? Not little white lies, but really important issues. Most responded that they believe their spouses will tell them the truth. Judy asked me what my response was. I told her I told the group that we have a strong marriage and we can talk about our problems, and I hope you will tell me the truth. Judy looked at me and said, "Jim, I would never lie to you. I told her that if she lied to me, I would never be able to trust her again, and without trust, marriage is impossible." Then I looked at her and said, "Well, we've had our talk. Do you have any secrets you need to tell me? I'm willing to listen." She made as if she was going to say something, but then she stopped. Then she answered, "No, Jim, I have no secrets hidden from you." Then I said, "By the way, Judy, I went to give blood today. Did you? We usually go on the same day." She looked at me a little nervously and said she went, but was told she had low iron levels and couldn't give blood this time. I looked at her and said mine wouldn't be taken either. Something about my wife might have HIV. Judy covered her mouth with her hands and said, "Oh my God, they said it would be confidential. I didn't know what they would tell you. I'm so sorry." I looked at Judy and said, "Trust and honesty make up a marriage? I gave you every chance to tell, and you're still keeping it from me." "Who the hell have you been sleeping with that you're willing to sacrifice your marriage for this and possibly give us STDs? "Please, Jim, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. It'll never happen again, I promise." "Who was that? That's the last time I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna go to your office and ask every son of a bitch if you don't tell me." Judy cried and kept asking me to forgive her. Then she said it was one of the salesmen, Bob Hawkins, at work. She said he had just recently come to the neighborhood and would only be here a few months for training, and then he would move. He flirted with all the ladies. One day he asked her to lunch. She herself didn't know why she did it, but he kept hitting on her, flirting with her constantly, and eventually she gave in. She decided it would be a one-time thing. She stated that he would be leaving at the end of the month. His temporary stay here was coming to an end. She told him he should wear a condom, but next to me he was a lousy lover. He just fucked her. He had no idea how to make love. Judy looked at me and said, "Jim, I'm so sorry I cheated on you. It was the only time in our marriage. I was stupid and acted like a schoolgirl. I promise you from the bottom of my heart that I will do everything I can to make it up to you. Please forgive me." Judy, at the beginning of our conversation, we both agreed that trust and honesty were necessary to save a marriage. You violated both. Even after I gave you a chance to tell me the truth, you still lied to me. Now you say it never happened before. Since you lied to me now, right to my face, there's no way I can tell the difference between your truth and your lies. You just ruined our marriage. For both our sakes, I hope your lover did wear a condom and it was enough to keep us both from contracting HIV. Judy sat on the couch and cried while I went and packed myself a couple suitcases. I told her we could file for divorce for no reason at all. We both had good jobs and were supporting ourselves. We could split all our assets 50-50. She could support Beth and I could take care of her college education. I told her she could explain everything to Beth since it was her fault and her problem. I will contact my attorney and he will contact her. Getting into my car, I drove away crying. Outwardly, I kept my cool, but inside I was tearing up. I wanted to throw up. 18 years of marriage to the bottom, and for what? A stupid affair. I rented a room in one of the economy motels for a week. I figured I'd be in better shape by then to know what my plans were. I called my boss and told him I had some personal business to attend to and would be gone for the rest of the week. He said it wasn't a problem and would see me the following Monday. I called the information desk to find out where Bob Hawkins lived. I called his home and was answered by his wife. She asked who I was, and I told her I was from the health department and I needed to talk to him. She said he wasn't home at the moment, but was going to meet a friend at a local pub. She then asked, "What does the local health department want with Bob?" I told her that he has HIV and is spreading it around the neighborhood. We need to know who he has been in contact with. She was stunned and said that we must have the wrong Bob Hawkins, that he wasn't from this area and was married with 2 children. I apologized and said I hoped she was right, but she might want to ask him about it when he got home. The bastard had a family and he didn't even tell his wife about it. What an asshole. I headed to the local pub, which was pretty empty on a weeknight. I spotted a couple in one of the booths and figured it must be Bob seducing someone else's wife. I approached him and asked him if he was Bob Hawkins, to which he replied that he was. I told him I worked for the health department and would like to talk to him on the street if I could. Of course, he agreed and told the woman he would be right back. We were about the same height, only he was about 15 years younger. That's probably what attracted Judy to him. Women like to think they're attractive to younger men. And us older guys, screw that. That made me even angrier. I had an old pair of brass knuckles I bought at a garage sale. You don't see many of those anymore. When we pulled into the parking lot, I slapped him on the wrist. I didn't say a word to him except to call him an asshole and a bastard. I proceeded to beat him to a pulp, mostly on his body. I kicked him twice on or near his balls. Then I kicked him in the jaw one more time. I think I broke it. I was ready to go to jail for that. It was what I had to do. As he lay there bruised and battered, I looked around, saw no one, so I walked to my car, went back to the motel, and cleaned myself up. I did my best to make sure there was no blood on me. I didn't want to take any chances with HIV. The next day, I heard on the news that a man had been beaten to a pulp in the parking lot of a pub in a Lower East Side neighborhood. There were no witnesses. The victim had several broken ribs and his jaw. He was unable to speak due to his mouth being jammed with wire binding his jaw. They said he had other injuries but didn't say which ones. I was hoping they would have to pull his balls out of his ass. From reports, no one in the pub seemed to notice anything strange. I guess the woman was married and didn't want to get involved. The bartender said he didn't see anything unusual. I contacted my solicitor and made an appointment to see a doctor. The next day, I talked to Beth and she was in tears and said her mom had told her the whole story and wanted to know if I could forgive her. I told Beth that the pain is all too real now. I'm going through a divorce, but she can contact me anytime. I told her to take care of her mom and make sure her mom was seeing doctors. It's been about 6 months. I went through with the divorce. It was finalized, and so far neither of us have any signs of HIV or any STDs. We were lucky. Not every person is as lucky as we were. Bob's wife filed for divorce after being tested and is now HIV positive thanks to her loving husband. I have no idea where Bob is now, but he never found out who beat the crap out of him. I guess a lot of husbands were out to get him. Several of the other women in Judy's office were also tested. Their records are being kept confidential. Judy's doing well. She calls me from time to talk and always apologizes for her actions. The problem is that she's lost my trust. As we've discussed, trust is gained, and once lost, it's very hard to regain. I'm fine. Judy kept almost everything except my personal belongings. She took out a second mortgage on the house and paid me half of the net worth of the house, so financially we're both doing okay. I have a small apartment, but it's just a place for me to lay down. I don't have a loving home anymore. We see each other from time to time. We have the same friends who hope that someday we will be together again. At least Judy takes full responsibility for her actions, instead of making a bunch of excuses. Inside, I miss Judy very much. She was the love of my life, and what did she ruin it all for? I know she's asking herself the same question. As for sex, I'm almost afraid to have it anymore. It was one of the most enjoyable things about being in a monogamous marriage. The sex has been great, and there have been no worries about STDs. I'm very afraid for Beth and afraid of dating. It's a pretty nasty world out there. I don't know what the future holds, but both Judy and I will have to deal with it. Hopefully, in another 6 months, I'll be able to donate blood again. I read story after story about cheating wives and even cheating husbands. I know that everyone is different and reacts differently to their spouse cheating on them. In most relationships, I would expect the husband to lose his temper and do something about it if he catches the man in bed with his woman. I just read a few stories, and in every one of them, the husband comes home early and discovers an unfamiliar car in the driveway. In most of them, he walks quietly through his own home and hears sounds coming from his master bedroom. He walks to the door, which is usually ajar so he can peek inside the room. On his marital bed, he sees his wife being had, and she screams, demanding more. Now, please understand that I am not attacking any writers or authors. I'm telling these stupid fucking wimps who are boyfriends and husbands. They watch their wives being had, and they feel sick to their stomachs. They are in an overwhelming situation, not knowing what to do, so they slowly leave the room, sneak back out of their own house, and go to a bar to do some more thinking while drinking a pint of Jim Beam. Later, they come home and act like nothing happened, and later try to plan some revenge. Is that what real men do? I say, bullshit for you horn-pointing weaklings, you sons of bitches, you sweet-sounding bastards who let other men take advantage of your wife while you stand back and watch. You don't want to ruin your sweet little marriage, and you may have to face the truth. To all of you so-called caring husbands and boyfriends, I say, fuck you. It happened to me, and I'll tell you what I did. Mandy and I were married for 11 years. We had 2 children, Trevor, who was 10 years old, and Jasmine, who was 8. I always thought we had a good marriage. Like most marriages, we made love all the time in the early years. We had a pretty full personal life. Missionary position, from behind, and even bought one of those Chinese books about 1,000 ways to have sex. About 6 of them were pretty good. The rest, the Chinese could take back. She always met me step for step. I have to say she was good. Her favorite position was riding on top. I liked that too when I got tired. She would climb on top of me and ride me like a fucking bronco. I know I sound like an asshole, but I wasn't always like this. I carry a lot of resentment, and I do. I need to get over it, but it's not easy. Like a lot of young people, we were up to our eyeballs in debt. It was our own fault. We wanted what our parents had, but we wanted it now. It took our parents 30 years to get their belongings together. It wasn't just Mandy spending money. I wanted new toys for myself, too. All new appliances and a big screen TV, to name just a few. Anyway, we got into debt. I was already working at the factory 6 days a week. We were getting checks to share in the profits, but because of the economy, they seemed to have gotten a lot smaller. Anyway, Mandy said she could go to work. I felt guilty about not being able to support my family, but it was the only way to get out of our debt. Mandy got a job at one of the local department stores. She didn't make much money, but she was able to work around the kids' schedule. Of course, that meant I didn't see her very often. At least not as often as I would have liked. The days we made love were fewer and farther apart. Mandy said that because of the kids and work, she just wasn't in the mood. I could understand that. There were days when I wasn't ready for it either. We had always argued about money before, but now it was about taking care of the house. She told me I needed to do more. She was probably right, and I tried. But then it turned out that I couldn't do things well enough or wasn't doing them the way she wanted. You have to understand that I didn't mind doing something, but if I had to do it, it was my way. One argument after another led to the withholding of sex. I think this was my punishment for not doing things the way she wanted. I started going to the bar while she was working. I was just angry and tired of being alone. The kids always went to their grandparents because Mandy's parents had a pool. We couldn't afford it. I met a few women at the bar, but I didn't do anything but talk to them. I did buy them a few drinks. It came to Mandy's attention that I was hanging around the bar. She was really pissed and told me that if I was going to screw some slut, she could do the same. I told her that wasn't true, and whoever told her I was cheating on her was a fucking liar. She didn't tell me who it was. She just went to bed and locked herself away from me. I thought about breaking the door down, but then I'd have to fix it. I figured she'd get over it, so I slept on the couch. We didn't get along at all then. We argued about nothing. We didn't talk anymore. We both threatened each other with divorce over nothing. The kids were spending more and more time with Mandy's parents. I think they hated seeing us argue, and it hurt them too. On Friday, I told Mandy that I was taking Saturday off and going fishing. I needed to get my thoughts together. Mandy said, "We need money and you're taking the day off. What the hell is wrong with you?" That was another argument. Mandy accused me of taking one girl from the bar with me. I didn't know where she got that information from, but she wouldn't tell me. It wasn't true, although I admit that over the last few weeks one of them kept hitting on me. I liked the attention, but I didn't do anything to her. I did talk to her quite lewdly, but honestly never touched her. One day she reached out and grabbed me. It actually felt good, but I put my hand on top and took her hand away. I told her that Mandy and I had problems in our marriage, but I wouldn't cheat on her. Saturday I got up, grabbed my fishing gear, and went for a walk. I was gone for about 4 hours when I think I finally came to my senses. Sometimes you need to be alone in the wilderness to clear your mind. That's what fishing did for me. I realized how stupid Mandy and I had been. Instead of talking with a clear head, we were both arguing, and neither of us was conceding an inch. I decided to go home so the two of us could sit down like adults and work through our problems. When I got home, there was a strange car in the driveway of my house. I immediately thought of those fucking stories and how the wussies reacted. I quietly walked into my house and listened for any sounds. I heard Mandy say, "Ralph, this isn't right, even if Clyde is cheating on me." I looked into the room and saw that Ralph had his hand on Mandy's breasts. Her blouse was unbuttoned and her bra was pulled up above her breasts. I walked into the room. "Oh my God, Clyde, what are you doing home?" "It's not what you think," Mandy said. God, what a stupid phrase. We were both smarter than that. I grabbed Ralph's arm and pulled him off the couch. The zipper on his pants was undone. I picked him up and punched him hard in the stomach. I hit him with a right cross to the jaw. I think I may have dislocated his jaw. I threw him across the living room, knocking over a table and a lamp. I jumped on him and punched him over and over. I stood up and kicked him in the balls. All the while, Mandy was screaming and crying, demanding that I stop. I picked up the bleeding, nearly lifeless piece of shit and threw him out the door onto my lawn. "You fucking whore, get out of my house!" I grabbed her and she screamed as I threw her out the front door, her breasts still sticking out. I slammed the door shut and locked it shut. I heard Mandy outside yelling for me to let her in. She needed to talk to me and call an ambulance for Ralph. I did neither, but about 5 minutes later a patrol car and an ambulance pulled up. They told me to open the door or they would break it down. I opened it and they rushed in. They told me to lie face down on the floor with my legs spread. One officer put his knee in my back and handcuffed me. The ambulance was already taking Ralph unconscious to the hospital. Mandy tidied up her clothes and put her breasts back in her bra back where they belonged. They talked to Mandy and took her statement. I didn't say a word. They read me my rights and I refused to talk. They put me in a patrol car and took me to jail. Mandy called the jail and even drove there. I told the officers running the facility that I didn't want to talk to her. It was one of the few rights I had left. An officer, a nice guy named Joe, came up to my holding cell to talk to me. "Off the record, Clyde, what the hell happened?" "Communication, or lack thereof," I replied. "My wife was getting ready to sleep with a guy on my couch. I'm not a fucking wuss, so I took matters into my own hands." "Did you hear her side of the story, Clyde?" he asked. "Joe, let me make it very simple. No one forced her to do it. She was going to do it of her own free will. What kind of man would I be if I took that kind of shit? I did what I had to do. Now I guess I'm going to have to pay for it," I said. I refused to even try to bail them out. I told them I wasn't going to waste money my family could use, so I might as well just go home in this situation. They were going to hire me one of those lawyers that the state provides. I was fine with that. He would be gone for at least a day or so. Either way, I needed time to cool off. Joe came back with a letter from Mandy. I immediately told him I didn't even want to read it. When I finally saw my lawyer, he told me I was in a heap of trouble. He wanted me to plead insanity. I laughed and told him that I knew exactly what I was doing, and if that asshole ever came near Mandy again, he'd get a repeat performance. I actually asked him if I had killed the bastard. "Damn close," my lawyer said. "Broken jaw, 2 ribs, 2 black eyes, and God knows what else. The police couldn't even take his statement about what happened. He was in no condition to speak. All they have is your wife's statement right now. I'm going to visit her myself tomorrow. Is there anything you'd like me to say to her?" "Yes, I would. Tell her she's free to sleep with whoever she wants now and I want a divorce," I said. I just became a very stubborn asshole. You had to be a hard ass in prison. I didn't even talk to Mandy. I refused to see her. I did get a few messages from my kids saying they missed me and wanted me to come home. Like I could just say, okay, I guess I'll go home tonight. It had been 2 months since the beating, and my trial was about to begin. At least some sort of pre-trial proceedings. The only witnesses were Mandy and this guy Ralph, who I found out worked where Mandy worked. I was sitting in the courtroom when they wheeled Ralph in a wheelchair. I think he broke his leg when I threw him out the door. His jaw was still bandaged, but the bruises were almost healed. My lawyer whispered to me that they had to surgically remove his testicles. They were tamped too far into his scrotum. He would not be able to have children. He was married, but his wife was divorcing him because of this fiasco. He wrote most of his statements as he was hard to understand because of the brace on his jaw. I looked back at the courtroom door and saw Mandy standing there. I felt anger and hurt when I saw her. She had been forced to appear at the hearing as a reluctant witness. They said she didn't have to testify against me, but she had to give her testimony about what happened. Well, I guess I had to hear it after all. Ralph was called first. He basically said or wrote that Mandy had invited him to visit, and they were getting intimate when I burst into the room and started beating him before he could even defend himself. He said he and Mandy were 2 consenting adults. He told the judge that I never gave anyone a chance to explain anything. I had only viciously attacked him. I felt like standing up and slapping him again. I would if I thought I could get close to him. Mandy threw him a very angry look and cried when she looked at me. Mandy was called to testify. She told the judge that she worked with Ralph. He had been hitting on her quite often, and she had always rejected his advances. Recently, he told her that her husband was cheating on her. She refused to believe it, and even told Ralph that she had talked to me about it. Then one day, Ralph came in with pictures that showed some slut with her hand on my bottom. Now I realized where I had seen Ralph before. He used to hang around outside Jake's bar where I was having a drink. He always kept his distance and never spoke to me. The bastard was taking pictures to use against me. Mandy then said, I was all shaken up after I found out Clyde was cheating on me. Ralph told me I should get even with him and do the same thing he was doing. I was confused. I love Clyde, but when we are angry, we do stupid things. I told Ralph about Clyde going fishing, and he told me that he overheard Clyde asking the bar whore to go with him. I was hurt, and maybe I even wanted to get even. I don't know. I was so embarrassed. That horrible Saturday, Clyde left and didn't even kiss me goodbye. The kids got up and asked to go to my mom's house for the day. That left me alone in the house thinking about what Clyde was doing. Then Ralph showed up at my door. I asked him what he was doing there, and he told me that he thought I could use some company since my husband was cheating on me. That son of a bitch set us up. I really hope the judge saw that. Of course, Mandy let him in, and seeing him in a wheelchair wouldn't have done me much good. Mandy continued. Ralph came in and I poured him a cup of coffee. We started talking about what Clyde was probably doing right now, and Ralph started flirting with me. He started undoing the buttons on my blouse and pulled my bra down over my breasts. I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't want this man. I wanted my Clyde, but I sat there and let him touch me. I watched as he leaned over, unzipped his pants, and I remember telling him that it was wrong, even if Clyde was really cheating on me. The next thing I remember was Clyde walking in and grabbing Ralph's hand. I was afraid that Clyde would kill him and I would be sent away. I know I yelled at Clyde to stop, but he was like a madman. He threw Ralph out the door and then called me a whore and a slut and pushed me out too. A few minutes later, the police arrived with an ambulance. Mandy was testifying in court in tears. I tried to contact Clyde and talk to him, but he refused to see me. I was so stupid, so stupid. She got off the stand and looked at me in tears. I had such mixed emotions. According to her, they had never done this before, and there was a good chance she wouldn't have gone for it. I knew she was hurting, but there was nothing I could do but watch. This asshole had ruined our lives. When I made my statement, I made the mistake of saying I would do it again. At the end of the whole trial, I was charged with assault and battery. The judge said that even though it happened in my home, Ralph was considered a guest. I could have asked him to leave, but legally I couldn't beat him to a pulp. The judge gave me 4 years. Mandy left the courtroom in tears. I never spoke to her. One day, sitting in my cell, I decided to write to her. I had something to say, and I had to get it off my chest. Dear Mandy, I do love you and always have. I have never cheated on you. If you go to the bar and ask Sue, I'm sure she will tell you the truth. I'll have my lawyer send you the divorce papers. You're too beautiful a woman to be alone. We made some serious mistakes that I will always regret. If we had communicated more, this might not have happened. I wish I could have, I should have, but now it's too late. Tell Trevor and Jasmine I love them. It's a shame their father's a criminal. I just couldn't stand by and let it happen. I'm not that kind of person. My only regret now is that you didn't believe me and decided to get revenge instead of talking to me. I hope you can find someone. Please forget about me and go on with your life. You should be getting your divorce papers any day now. Always loving you, Clyde. I sent off the divorce papers and gave all our possessions to Mandy. Where I was living now, I didn't need anything. I was even given food and underwear. All I could do now was waste my time. I had no real skills other than working as a laborer, so I started trying to better myself by enrolling in rehab programs. At least when I got out, I could probably get a job. I was put into a welding program. I had done a little welding at my old job, but now I could become a master welder and maybe build a future when I got out. Every night I thought about my family, my kids without a father, and Mandy living without me. Life really did suck. About 2 months went by, and the cell duty officer said I had a visitor. I figured it was a lawyer with my divorce papers. There were 2 types of visitation centers in this prison. Those with glass between them where you talk on the phone, and others where you sit at a table and talk face to face. There was minimal touching in this visitation area. This was the one I was sent to. Waiting for me at the table was Mandy. She looked up, looked at me, and cried. "Hey, Mandy, what brings you here?" I asked. "I don't want a divorce. I'll wait for you as long as it takes. I don't want anyone but you. I made a terrible mistake not believing you. It'll never happen again. I know you may not believe me, but I don't think I'd go any farther than I did. I felt so guilty. I was almost glad when you walked in. Now our lives are a mess because of what we both did. I take half the blame for being so stupid for not trusting you. I did meet this woman, Sue, and she told me that she really cared for you and tried to be affectionate, but you told her you were happily married and wouldn't cheat on me. I told her about Ralph and the pictures, and she got really mad. In fact, she said she had to kill the bastard. How are the kids doing? Are they all right? I asked. They are doing as well as could be expected. I couldn't afford the house, so we're selling it. We moved in with Mom and Dad for a while until we can get back on our feet. We are closing on the house next week. I put all of our furniture and your personal belongings in storage. When you get out, we can start over. She started crying. I'm so sorry. I miss you so much. I can't live without you. I love you, Clyde. I miss you too, but you need to get on with your life. I can't expect you to wait for me for another 3 years or so, I replied. I told you I'm not going to get a divorce. I'm waiting for you. If you want a divorce when you get out, then I will sign the papers, but not before, she replied. We talked some more, and then I asked the officer's permission to kiss her goodbye. She kissed me very tenderly, and tears ran down her face. She told me that she would come there every month to see me. I told her not to come every month. It would be too painful every time she left. She agreed to come about once every 3 months. Prison life continued. About once a month, I would get letters from my children telling me what they were doing, and sometimes they would send a picture. I have one picture of them with their smiling mother. It was the same one I hung on my camera wall. I was pretty successful in mastering the welding technique. The instructor told me he would give me a job reference when I got out. Mandy stopped by to see me every 3 months. She said everything was fine. She changed jobs and worked at another department store where she was a department manager with a slightly higher salary. Her parents let her save most of the money so she could eventually get back on her feet. I asked her what her parents now thought of me, a criminal. Mom and Dad love you, Clyde. They know you did it because of your temper. They were really mad at me for being so stupid. They told me I was losing a good husband because of my lack of communication. In fact, when the divorce papers came and they saw them, they asked me what I was going to do. When I tore them up in front of them, they smiled. Another 6 months went by and they told me I had another visitor. They wanted to see me at the glass display case, not at the tables. I had no idea who might have wanted to see me. I walked over to the window. Ralph was there, holding the telephone receiver. "What do you want, you son of a bitch?" I asked. "I just thought I should let you know I'm going to follow through," he said. "What the hell are you talking about, asshole?" I said. "Your wife's sex work. That's what I set out to do, and now I'm going to finish the job. You know we're dating, don't you?" he said. "You lying bastard. When I get out of here, I'm going to finish this job. I'm going to nail your fucking ass." I was really pissed, but I couldn't help it. "All right, maybe I'll even take pictures of having your wife and send them to you. You can hang them in your cell," he laughed. "I'll find you and kill you, you son of a bitch," I stated. He laughed. "I won't be here by then. See you, Clyde." He hung up the phone and walked away. Damn it, things were going pretty well, and now the bastard was back. I was pretty sure Mandy wasn't seeing him, but I needed to call her and warn her. I finally got to the phone. I could only make calls for a fee. I hoped they would accept that. Trevor picked up the phone and answered yes to the call. "Dad. Hey, Dad. How are you doing? Boy, it's good to hear your voice." "I really miss you, Dad." "I miss you too, Trevor, but right now I gotta talk to my mom. It only takes me a few minutes per call." "Is she there?" He said, "Yes, she's here. Mom, Dad needs you at the phone." I heard her scream. "What?" in the background. "Clyde, is that you? What's the matter, honey?" she asked. She knew I wouldn't have called unless it was urgent. "Have you talked to Ralph lately?" I asked. "No, of course not. I can't stand the bastard after what he did to us." "What's the matter, Clyde?" she asked. "He showed up here a while ago and said that you two were dating." "It's a lie, Clyde, a damn lie. You have to believe me," she said. "I do believe you, Mandy, but I know he's coming for you somehow. I need you to protect yourself and watch that bastard. I don't know what to do next, but I'm warning you. He's going to try to get even by sleeping with you," I said. "I'd rather die than let that asshole near me. Honey, I'll be fine. You taught me how to take care of myself. It's no use calling the police because they don't react until something happens." "Just be careful. I have to hang up now. I love you, Mandy." It was all I could do. I didn't want to make any more fuss without proof. I didn't sleep well for a few days. About a week later, another customer came to my tables. "Clyde, I'm Lieutenant Abrams, and this is Officer Ryan. We're from the sheriff's office." "Well, Lieutenant, what do you want from me?" I asked. "About 3 days ago, as far as we could tell, Ralph Medley was shot and killed outside the bar you were visiting. Is there anything you can tell us about that? Do you also own a gun?" "Lieutenant, I spent 2.5 years here because of that asshole. I could hardly shoot him from here, and no, I don't have a gun. Mandy wouldn't let a gun in the house. According to the visitor log, he was here last week. What did he want?" "He came to make fun of me, saying I was locked up and he was free as a bird. I think it was to sprinkle salt on the wounds, so to speak," I replied. "Any idea who might have had a grudge against him?" he asked. "Look, guys, I don't give a damn about him. He's dead. Good riddance to the wretched scum. What do I care? Hell no. Whoever the hell did it, I hope they get away with it." Though I heard his ex wasn't too happy with him, I replied. "What about your wife? What's her name? Mandy? She might be interested in seeing him dead," the lieutenant said. "Mandy doesn't have the temperament to do something so disgusting. Hell, she wanted me to call an ambulance when I beat the crap out of him. You're in the wrong place if you're watching Mandy. She's got 2 kids she has to support on her income, and now she lives with her parents. She doesn't have time to wipe her ass, let alone shoot someone," I laughed. "Well, Clyde, thanks for at least talking to us," he said. Hey, were you going to tell me what you know about the shooting? Hell, officer, I told you everything I know." "Fair enough." Ralph walked into Jake's bar around 7 o'clock. He sat idly drinking and met a sexily dressed blonde in the doorway. She never went inside, so the people in the bar couldn't get a proper look at her face. They circled the parking lot, and the next thing the customers heard were gunshots, 2 of them. By the time they got outside, Ralph was dead from 2 Luger shots to the face. The woman was gone. We think it might have been her, but we don't have any proof of that, except that she must have been the last person with him before he was shot. "I'm sorry, I can't help you, but he probably got what he deserved," I said. I wanted to call Mandy and tell her that she had nothing more to worry about. I was afraid someone might listen to my phone call, so I just kept quiet. The shooting was reported in the papers, and it said they had no real suspects. They did mention my name since I beat the crap out of him, but they knew where I was at the time. The next week, it was time for Mandy to visit me again. I was so happy to see her. She asked me if I had heard about Ralph. I told her about the police coming and talking to me. She told me that they had talked to her, too. She told them that depending on the exact time of day she was working or coming home from work. Her parents vouched for her arrival time. I asked her if they had asked her if we had guns. Yes, they did ask me. I told them I don't allow guns in the house, just like you told me to tell people if they ever asked when you bought them years ago. Where's my Luger, the one we bought a few years ago from that crazy street vendor? I asked. Probably in storage with the rest of your stuff, she replied. The important thing is that you're safe. That's all that matters. Being in this prison has given me a lot to think about. When I get out, do you think we can put all this behind us and start over? I asked. She smiled at me and said, I know we can. No more secrets and a lot more communication. I love you, Clyde. I always have and always will. A couple months later, I was called into the warden's office. He told me that I would be released early. It would be in about 2 weeks. I couldn't have been happier. I called Mandy. Honey, can you come and pick me up in about 2 weeks? I asked. You mean come and see you? Yes, I can, she replied. No, not come and see me, but come and get me. I'm on parole, I smiled. I heard Mandy start to cry. Oh my God, oh my God. When? What day? What time? Oh my God, Clyde, I'm so happy. She was still crying. 2 weeks later, I was released. Mandy came and picked me up. She had a different car. She said the old one was out of order. She looked beautiful when she came up to me and kissed me. She was crying and I had tears in my eyes. We headed over to her parents' house and they had a sign out. Welcome home, Daddy! The kids must have done it. My kids looked so grown up when I hugged and kissed them. Other than their pictures, I hadn't seen them in 3 years. My mother-in-law came over and gave me a hug, and I shook my father-in-law's hand. I carried my suitcase into the house and was greeted by several of our old friends. I wouldn't let Mandy go far from me. Honey, where do you want me to sleep? I asked Mandy. In our bed, silly. We moved it downstairs a couple days ago so you and I could have some privacy. It was Daddy's idea, but tonight you and I are going to a motel. I booked a room. I have 3 years of contained love that I've been saving for you. God, I've missed you so much, she said. After everyone had almost left the party and I said goodnight to my kids, Mandy said we'd see everyone tomorrow. It was pretty funny if you think about it. Everyone knew where we were going and what we were going to do. I looked in our closet to see if I had any clothes in there. I opened one drawer and there was a blonde wig in there. Mandy came in and saw me looking at it. I bought it and wore it once. I think I look better as a brunette, she smiled. She pointed to a couple drawers where she had put some of my clothes. I pulled out a fresh change of clothes and some other change to take with me to the motel. We headed for the exit and talked about our future. We both agreed that if either of us had a problem, we would face it head on. No more secrets and lots of socializing. When we got to the motel, we decided to have a drink together. She was sitting at a table looking pretty, so I walked over to get us drinks. When I turned around, there was some guy sitting next to Mandy. I could hear their conversation from where I was waiting for our drinks. Hey, babe, are you here all alone? He asked. Please go away. I'm married and waiting for my husband to return. I'm asking you nicely, but he won't do it, Mandy said. Damn, baby. Why would I be afraid of your old man? He asked. Clyde, honey, please come here, she asked. The man looked at me and said, I'm sorry, ladies and sir, I made a mistake. I mistook you for someone else. And ran out the front door. I looked at a laughing Mandy. What the hell did that all mean? You'd have thought he'd seen a ghost, I asked. Honey, you're very well known in this part of town. You're somewhat of a legend. Almost every man who approached me only had to tell them I was married to Clyde O'Brien and they'd leave me alone. Most people still think you're also responsible for Ralph's death, she replied. We went up to our room and Mandy asked me how I wanted to do it. I told her that I wanted fast and furious sex the first time to get rid of the tension. Then we were going to make slow, intimate love. She undressed as I took off my clothes as well. She climbed onto the bed and I followed her. She looked at me and said, "Damn it, honey. I needed this as much as you did. Let me get up and go to the bathroom and clean this place up so we can really love each other. I've missed you so much." She got off the bed with her hands between her legs, not wanting to make a mess on the way to the bathroom. I poured each of us a cup when I heard the sound of water running in the shower. I set them aside and went into the shower with her. When she came out wrapped in a towel, I handed her a drink. A toast to the woman I love. May we always be together. We both took a sip, and I pulled the towel off her and sat her on the edge of the bed. A satisfied smile froze on her face. "I love you so much, Clyde. I think that might have been enough for the first 6 months," she said. "That still leaves us with 2.5 years to spare," I smiled back. Epilogue. In the weeks that followed, I found a job as a welder for a large firm. The man who hired me told me that they give a lot of second chances if the employees are good workers, show up on time, and don't do drugs. He also told me that I came highly recommended. He never said by whom. After a few months, we were able to rent our own house. We had a lease with an option to buy. It was also in the same neighborhood as Mandy's parents. We were going to be a family again. We walked up to the warehouse building, and there stood Lieutenant Abrams and Officer Ryan with 2 other officers who had a warrant to search the warehouse building. I knew they were looking for a Luger. As they went through the boxes, I tried to get Mandy's attention. At this point, they separated us. One officer came out with a Luger in his hand. He put it in a plastic bag and handed it to the lieutenant. The lieutenant walked up to Mandy and said, "I thought you didn't allow guns in your house, Mrs. O'Brien." Mandy looked at him and said the warehouse building was not her home. O'Brien: "Well, young lady, I suggest you don't go too far from the house until we test that Luger. The police left and I went to Mandy's." "I thought you'd gotten rid of that gun by now. God, Mandy, what are we going to do now?" "Do?" Mandy asked. "Do what? Oh my God, you think I killed Ralph?" "I didn't do it, Clyde. I don't know who did it, but it wasn't me. I didn't think about the gun until you reminded me." The next day, the lieutenant came to our new house and even returned the Luger. He said the serial number had been wiped off and it didn't even have a striker. If it wasn't, it would have been illegal to own it. As it was completely useless and probably hadn't been fired in years. Mandy had told him to keep it or throw it away. She didn't allow firearms in her house. She even wondered how it had gotten into the storage building. Perhaps it had belonged to one of the movers. All she knew was that it wasn't hers. After this strange situation, our lives have largely returned to normal. The main thing I learned was to always communicate better with Mandy. She realized that it all started because she didn't trust me. I could still divorce her, but we would both have lost a lot of time. Our sex life is as good as it was when we first got married. The only thing she knows is that I won't cheat on her, and she knows what would happen if she cheated on me. It's funny when we go out with friends. They always ask me if they can dance with Mandy. I think I'm going to be a legend in our little town for a while. About a month ago, we got a call from the lieutenant. He said we were no longer under surveillance because of Ralph's murder. It was Sue, the woman from the bar. Ralph turned her on and she let him fuck her. Apparently she was a psycho bitch, a black widow. She had sex with men and then killed them when she was done with them. The police were investigating a case of a cheating wife and went to a bar to talk to the husband. It was there that the man was with Sue. They talked to her and asked to look in her car. In the trunk, they found a blonde wig and a Luger. She confessed to them to shooting Ralph and 3 other unsolved murders. All of them were husbands who cheated on their wives. The first murder was in Atlanta, where her husband was found murdered behind a local bar. That got me thinking that if I had cheated on Mandy, I might be lying in an alley right now. I know my wife, and I know that she wants something special, something that is extremely important to her. Susan dressed in her sexiest outfit, a tight red dress with a low neckline and short hemline. She adorned it with jewelry designed to emphasize her incredible natural beauty and to remind her of our shared past. The brooch I'd given her on our 15th anniversary, the necklace I'd given her on her 3rd Mother's Day, and finally the earrings, my first gift to her on our honeymoon. The high heels of her red shoes visually lengthened and accentuated Susan's already long legs, covered in the finest fishnet stockings. She cooked my favorite dinner and was ready to fulfill my every wish from the moment I stepped through the door. All of this went far beyond the lengths she would normally go to when she wanted something from me. Of course, I've always tried to be a generous husband, but I'm sorry. I don't print money after all. I have spent most of my career as a private personal injury attorney, and while this has allowed our family a certain level of comfort, there are still some limits. Such an extraordinary level of effort on her part can only mean that Susan intends to ask for something that goes far beyond normal limits. I know my wife and realize that what she wants is far more than we can afford. Susan has been a wonderful homemaker for many years and has raised our 2 children, who have now left home and are in college. She is a good wife and mother who cooks beautifully and tries to keep her body in shape. She is generous with love and affection in bed, has always been the first to volunteer to help the children with their schoolwork, and because of her, I feel loved and appreciated. However, over the years, she has tried many activities and hobbies that can dispel the boredom of a stay-at-home mom, for example, bird watching, selling cosmetics, writing, and much, much more. When she wanted to try a particularly expensive hobby, she would go all out for it, which, by the way, is pretty much how it was now. When Susan wanted to go back to work after the kids left home, it was a lot easier. She knew I wouldn't have to be convinced, because for once, she would be bringing money home instead of spending it. But it's been 2 years since she started working again. That's a lot longer than it usually takes for her to get bored with a new occupation, put it on the back shelf, and start looking for something new. For whatever reason, this next hobby of hers took too long. I know my wife, and I know what she's like when she has a new obsession. Susan serves dinner, and over the meal, we casually discuss how my day went. This is always a necessary part of pre-meeting maneuvers. Trying to get what she really wants from her directly will only spoil our pleasant and leisurely dinner, since she herself thinks she knows the process to a fine point. One day, during a phase of personal self-improvement, Susan read a book about negotiation. It was her new hobby, which fortunately did not last long. What she learned from the book was that keeping a clear schedule, proper sequencing, and providing information only when she wanted it was the key to getting what she wanted. That may not be a bad strategy, but she's used it so often that I can see all her games and tricks a mile away. After dinner, she clears the table and invites me to sit with her in the living room. I sit down in my chair and she stands as usual. She is obviously going to defend with all her passion what she has come up with this time, so she needs the opportunity to strut around the room. Well, I know my wife, and I can pretty much imagine what this is going to be about. She will go on at length, telling me how this, I don't know what it is yet, will make her happy. I think she'll probably offer something in return: new golf clubs, promises of improving our financial well-being, opportunities to spend time and money on one of my favorite projects. Basically, something she thinks has appropriate value. If I agree to the proposal, she will happily jump on my lap and ask me to take her to bed immediately, promising as an additional reward the sexual pleasures that will match her scale of what she has achieved from me. If I say no, well, then I can expect a very cold, if not Arctic, atmosphere in the bedroom for weeks, if not months. And still she might try to act behind my back and then just apologize. Over the years, it's gotten easier for me to just say yes, knowing that she'll get bored before she gets too caught up in her next temporary mania. I know my wife, and I realize that today she will try her hardest to get a simple yes from me. Susan begins by talking about her job. She likes working there, but she says there is a new young manager who has recently joined her department and has taken a special interest in her. At first I nod, thinking Susan means that he wants to be her mentor, or that she's hoping for a promotion. I know that would mean an increase in her work hours and assume that she probably wants to reduce her responsibilities around the house. Then I realize that she's talking much more not about her job, but about this manager. He comes from a wealthy family. He's handsome, dresses well, travels a lot, and has the physique of an athlete. Using his famous last name and his own business acumen, this manager quickly rose through the ranks at her company. Susan trained him shortly after he started working there, and now he is her boss. She goes on and on about him, listing his many positive qualities. I know my wife and now realize what, or rather who, has become her new obsession. Susan then tells me that she has become close to her boss. She says she hadn't mentioned him before because she rarely talked about her work at all. As she talks about him, I remember seeing him once at a Christmas party. He came up and said hello to both of us then. At first glance, he seemed very friendly toward Susan, but he quickly disappeared into the crowd and I didn't think much of it. So, Susan continued, he flirted with her. At first, she thought it was just office flirting or a young man jokingly making ambiguous remarks about an older colleague. But there was more to it than that. It turns out that her young and daring boss has had his eye on her for a long time and recently told her of his intentions. Every year he goes on a weekend getaway to a tropical island, and this time he wants to take Susan with him. Not us, her. And my wife wants to go with him, so she needs a pass. From me. I know my wife, and I realize I'm watching, as if in slow motion, my marriage come to an end. Susan sees my face stiffen and immediately switches to another tactic. She starts to insist. She was a virgin when we got married, and she wants to know what it's like to be with another man. He's a real gentleman. This will be our little secret, and no one else will ever know about anything ever again. It'll be a one-time thing. She loves me, and nothing will change that. It will be a new, exciting adventure for both of us. She'll come home completely refreshed and drown me in her caresses. It's not my fault, and it's not about me. It's just sex. If I love her, I'll let her have it. All of these arguments, one after another, bounce off me like peas off a wall, and at some point she realizes it's not working. Then she moves on to the bargaining stage. I can get my own left pass. No 2 passes, no 1, and no restrictions. She'll let me buy that boat I've wanted for a long time. No? Then he will buy it for me. He will provide and pay for me to take a fancy vacation with a very friendly companion. He can greatly benefit my career and Susan's career. Sexually, she will fulfill my every whim as I desire, for the rest of our lives. She will never say no to me again, in bed or out of it. She'll give me anything and everything I want. I tell her the most important thing I want is a faithful wife. But, I know my wife, and I can see she's unwavering in her stubbornness. Susan is beginning to tell me that she is doing me the honorable and decent thing because she is openly letting me know what she wants. She's asking my permission, not just cheating on me behind my back. She wants her pass because by using it, she will remain faithful to me. She wants to give the pass to me so we can each have a new experience while remaining faithful. She asks to do this so she doesn't have to cheat in secret. I tell her that she doesn't have to cheat at all. She just wants it like a little girl wants a new toy, a handsome Ken. Now Susan's getting angry. She calls me a hypocrite because I slept with others before her, as if the vows we made at the altar didn't matter. She calls me selfish because she spent decades of her life and the best of her younger years on me and our family while I pursued a career, as if I was fucking lucky to work long hours at a job I wasn't too fond of. She calls me a fossilized, backward modern man because I don't want to open our marriage, as if fidelity is some fickle trend and which is in and out of fashion. I sit back, watching nonchalantly as she rushes around the room, waving her arms around and spewing her anger at me. I know my wife, and I realize she's not going to let this go. Finally, Susan runs out of steam and gives up. I tell her I can't stop her. I know she will eventually decide to go behind my back, as she has done so many times before when a new obsession has completely taken over her thoughts. I tell her that asking permission without caring if it is granted is still cheating and treason, and that I don't give my wife that permission. I tell her that if she leaves with him, she shouldn't come back. She won't be welcome here. Susan glares angrily at me, but says nothing. Unable to get what she wants, she snorts irritably, turns sharply on her heels, stomps up the stairs, and slams the door shut in our bedroom. My shoulders slump doomfully. Grief has settled into my heart, and I have nothing to do now, so I'm alone with my mournful thoughts. My anger and sadness have no outlet yet. I weave into the spare bedroom, undress and crawl under the covers, then toss and turn from side to side for the rest of this long, dark, and lonely night. I know my wife and realize I'm going to have a hard time falling asleep that night. When I wake up, Susan is already gone. Her suitcase is gone. Her warm clothes are gone too, and she hasn't taken her phone. Along with its charger, it's lying on the bedside table. So alas, I couldn't contact her even if I wanted to, and I don't want to. Under the phone is a note Susan left for me. In it, she expresses her hope, if not certainty, that I'll change my mind when I've had time to think seriously about it. She explains that she'll be back Monday night. She also writes that she loves me and hopes that while she's away, I'll use the affair pass she issued, which, as I've told her repeatedly, I neither accept nor want to receive. She assures me that she will come back just as loving as she left, if not more so. For some reason, she mistakenly believes that she will still be a valuable treasure that I would be glad to have back, rather than trash that I would rather get rid of. Well, her delusion is understandable. Up until now, she had been my greatest treasure. But now, she's not. Right now, Susan is on an airplane and I am here. It's Friday morning. I called the office and left a message that I would not be there, as there is more important work I need to do. I couldn't give vent to my emotions last night, but now I have nothing but rage in my heart and the time I need. The next thing I do is call an old friend of mine and thus set the wheels and gears of the legal machine in motion. He starts drafting the divorce papers. I send him a copy of our prenuptial agreement, which includes, among other things, an adultery clause, as well as information about the assets she and I have in common. I ask him to be fair, given the fact that Susan is the mother of my children, but in no way be overly generous to her. Given the structure of our assets and the details of the prenuptial agreement, the division should be very simple. I know my wife and remember that she never paid much attention to legal details. Susan was strict about keeping the house in order. It was the only thing she really excelled at. Over this weekend, it will be easy for me to find all of her things, pack them in bags and boxes, and send it all to storage. I want Susan to realize as soon as she opens the door that this is no longer her home. The job of packing and moving her stuff out turns out to be somewhat morally satisfying. It allows me to focus on something I can control. All of this takes most of the weekend, leaving my body so exhausted each night that it's all I can do to collapse into bed and pass out. At least my brain isn't plagued at night by endless and generally useless thoughts about where things have come to. Monday morning, I prepare myself for the confrontation ahead. I call our kids and inform them of what is to come. I don't go into details, but they now know that their mother has decided to cheat on me, after trying to get me to make our marriage open. They are smart kids. They know me, and they realize that there is no changing my mind on this issue. I cry with them and assure them that I love them with all my heart. At least she didn't try to poison the kids' relationship with me. I then call our closest friends, sharing the news with them, and they are all just shocked. I call my parents, and they, of course, are supportive. Finally, I call and tell Susan's parents everything, and they were horrified at what their daughter was up to. I know my wife and I know that no one would support her. Susan's plane will be landing soon. My friend stayed up half the night to do me a favor and worked painstakingly this weekend. He handed me all the necessary copies of documents in a simple but unmistakable envelope of heavy manila paper. I decided not to hand these papers to Susan at the airport. This is not out of any loyalty. I really hope she will be ashamed of her actions. After all, I was the one who made sure that a phone storm erupted in our usual social circle. Her phone, which she had purposely forgotten and which was now sitting on the hallway table, was flooded with text messages and voicemails from family, friends, and acquaintances condemning her. I didn't hand the papers to Susan at the airport because I want to see her face when she realizes how much this weekend cost her. In normal life, I am not a violent person. Perhaps my wife, who will be an ex in the near future, mistook my kindness for weakness. Perhaps she saw my generosity as a lack of will. But even a kind person can be driven to cruelty. Even a generous person can bang his fist on the table and exclaim, "I've had enough." I know my wife and I foresee that her life will soon become much less comfortable than what she is used to. Susan swings the door open and enters the house with a wide, serene smile on her radiant face. She is truly fresh and beautiful, and I feel a brief prick of regret over what is about to happen. But almost immediately I remember that it doesn't have to happen. It's already happened. She betrayed our vows. It was her own choice. She chose her young and attractive boss over me, her husband. She chose to destroy our history and our life together, even though I warned Susan of the imminent consequences of her actions. Her smile disappears, and her face itself stretches and stiffens when she sees our living room. It takes her a moment to realize what has changed in the house. Her still beautiful eyes flicker around, looking around the room and noticing the absence. Yes, she sees some things missing. The crystal vase she loved to put flowers in for birthdays and anniversaries, our wedding portrait, dear to her heart souvenirs from our travels together, and more. But much, huge, more painful is the lack of love. Even when we fought, even when I was sometimes angry with her, the strong bulwark between us was always love. But not now. I'm in no hurry to greet her. There is no tenderness in my manners now. I don't even say hello to her. But I hold in my hand the very envelope of heavy paper that is unmistakable, and which will show her with bitter precision how little she will have left when our paths part in different directions. I know my wife, and I can clearly see the tentacles of fear creeping inside her and spreading out to grip her heart with cold. Susan's eyes widen in panic. She begins to protest, to beg, to cry. I am impassive. She repeats the same arguments she made before she left, about how it was just meaningless sex, about her abiding love for me, and that she would do anything for me. I'm indifferent. She tries to remind me of our marriage, our children, our life together. I'm furious. I rise to my feet, struggling to contain my anger. I hiss through my teeth that I was the one who remembered these things, not her. I was the one who appreciated these things and everything she was just talking about. She didn't. I begged her not to throw it all away, not to go to him, but she blithely, selfishly refused. These were the best moments of my life, and now she's trying to use the memory of them as a bargaining chip. I tell her that right now she makes me nothing but disgusted. I know my wife, and I feel that it is only now that she is finally realizing that she has ended us by her actions. Susan is overwhelmed by a wave of anger, and she begins to rage. She screams that I can't do this to her, that I can't take her whole life away from her, that this is not only mine, but her home, that I have no right to kick her out, that she's always supported me, that she raised our children, that... I start to shut down from her accusations, sobbing and yelling. Eventually, she runs out of breath, collapses on the couch, and, shrinking and shaking, breaks into loud sobs. I am not a cruel man, and it is time for me to show her mercy by giving Susan one last blow to end her useless tantrum. I didn't take anything from you. You threw away the best of what we had. There's nothing left here for you anymore. Now go away. I know my wife. Now I think she's finally, for the first time, really gotten to know me. I hate unexpected phone calls. I don't like Mondays. I'm usually in an uplifted mood after the weekend, and the boring routine of paperwork seems so dull. My wife, Kate, called during lunch to see when I would be home. She was out shopping and wanted to be home when I arrived. Then the phone rang at 2 in the afternoon as I was putting the finishing touches on the client database. I tried to put the handset on the lever and repeat the last few keystrokes. Good afternoon, Dave Marshall. No answer, just lots of background noise and a few muffled voices. Good afternoon, Dave Marshall. Still nothing. I almost hung up thinking it was just kids making nuisance calls. Then I realized it was my wife, Kate. Kate often accidentally redials on her phone. I wouldn't mind $1 for each time she did it. Realizing who it was, I decided to eavesdrop on her shopping trip. My birthday was just around the corner and I could get some idea of what she wanted to get me. It turned out to be one of my worst decisions that day. Don't worry. My husband is at work and I don't have to be home until 5 p.m. We have 2 hours. That's really nice. Don't stop. That was Kate's voice. Of course it wasn't a shopping trip. The rustling of clothes and moans continued for a few minutes. How long, I don't know. I was in shock. I knew it was a guy by the grunts he was making in response to what Kate was doing to him. Yes, And I strained to hear what was going on. One part of me couldn't believe it. There had to be a simple explanation. The other, logical part of my brain was telling me it was true, that she was cheating on me. I didn't recognize the male voice, so I was pretty sure it wasn't one of our friends. So who was it? Why was she cheating on me, on us? Kate's burst of giggles brought me back to the phone ringing. God, you're in a hurry. I like to lie on my back and enjoy myself. Dude, you're the best. My wife can't keep up with you. I knew what he meant. Now she was giving someone else the same pleasure. A louder-than-usual grunt on the phone brought my attention back to what was happening there. Kate murmured, Not yet, I want to continue. Soon, all too soon, I heard her begin her magic again. Yes, Kate, I'm almost there. Another explosion of giggles, and then Kate's voice again. God, I thought you'd never stop. Not always, but today is a special day. You're special. The next 5 minutes were full of licking and satisfied moans. Kate again, Okay, now it's my turn. Just let me undress and then caress me. Again the rustle of clothes hastily removed and tossed aside. The creak of springs, the sound of their kisses. When Kate is aroused, she's sensitive to the slightest touch. I can bring her to the brink with light stroking of her breasts, belly, hips, and knees. This sensitivity makes her lose control and she always gets bright and loud. Her asshole lover just found this out when she started screaming, demanding he stop teasing and finish her off. Oh God, yes, sis. You know how to pleasure a woman. Oh, so. Yes. The sound of her panting and the way he was eating her had a strong effect on me. I wanted to reach into the phone and strangle them both. 2 fingers, one wasn't enough. Faster, faster, I'm almost there. Yes. Now the sounds I heard were quiet breathing and the springs of the bed as he lay down next to her, and she came. Kate always enjoys the aftertaste of a good finish, lying still and quiet for 5 or 6 minutes after she's done. Judging by the silence, that was the case. Nothing for the next few minutes. Then Kate's voice. My God, you're really recovering fast. Let's see how long you can hold out this time. The guy muttered something, and I heard Kate say, No, we can do it later. My God, she wasn't using any protection. She was letting him have himself without a rubber. As the frantic sounds of my wife and lover's copulation spread through the phone lines, I finally lost control. I couldn't take it anymore and threw the phone against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 different pieces that scattered like confetti across the furniture and across the floor. For the next hour, I sat there in abject despair, tears streaming down my cheeks. I wrapped my arms around my head and wept for what I had lost. How could she have done this? She never said she wasn't happy with our lives. How long had she been doing this? Was I getting sloppy seconds, and from whom? My marriage was falling apart. She wanted someone else. I, for one, could never share her. I loved her too much for that. I would never be a cuckold. I felt humiliated as a man and as a lover. Her comments about his size made me feel inferior, and it made me even angrier. I decided I would go home, talk to her about it, then pack my bag and leave. Thank goodness we didn't have children. We hadn't been married long enough to have a lot of stuff, so it wasn't hard for me to pack. The house was rented, and the furniture was mostly hers. My heart was broken at what I had lost, but I knew I had to be strong to confront it. I gathered my wits, then cleared my desk, getting ready to leave. Just as I was packing my briefcase, there was a knock, and my secretary walked in. She stopped and stared at me with my red, puffy eyes. After looking around the room, her gaze stopped on the broken phone. Worry and concern flashed across her face before she continued what she had come to do. Dave, are you okay? Can I get you anything? Shaking my head, I whispered, No, I'm fine. I'm leaving a little early today. I have some private matters to take care of. Okay, before you go, talk to your wife on the phone in my office. She couldn't get through on your private line. She glanced again at the broken phone, scattered in tiny pieces across the red carpet. My wife? I don't want to talk to her. My voice went up 2 levels as my anger rose to the surface. "Tell her I'll see her later." The poor woman looked like she had swallowed something nasty while mulling over my angry response. "I'm sorry she said you would, but I have to tell her it's urgent, and that if you don't answer the phone, don't bother coming home. This cheating bitch demanded that I talk to her. Well, I will, but on my terms. I'll soon let her know that she'll be the one on her ear, not me." Rushing past the receptionist, I grabbed her phone and pressed the flashing red button on line 2. "What the hell is this shit?" "Dave, just calm down and listen and I'll explain everything." My anger was uncontrollable, but I figured I'd give her enough rope to hang herself and then let her know I heard everything. "Okay, explain." "Oh, you did? Now I know you're mad, but you hung up on me a little sooner than I thought. I thought you were going to try to tape what I was doing so you could let me hear it later. Well, never mind." I cut her off. "Did you know I was listening? Did you do it knowing I could hear what was going on?" "Well, of course I knew. After all, I dialed the number and waited for you to answer before we started. Now, I know this is confusing, so let me set the record straight. First, I know about your little affair with Debbie, and I know it's over. It was just so you knew that both could play. Now you understand the pain I felt when I found out." I was stunned. She knew about me and Debbie. How could she? It had only lasted a month, 5 secret meetings. The guilt was too great, so I ended it. How could she know about it? "I didn't tell anyone. Debbie, that bitch, it was all her doing. Debbie was upset that I broke up with her. Did she tell Kate?" It was the only plausible answer I could come up with. "Dave? Dave, are you here?" "Yeah, I'm here." My anger subsided a little, and my voice was almost back to normal. "Who was that guy you slept with? How could you possibly know about Debbie? Why didn't you just tell me?" "Out of order. First, Debbie was a little pissed off that you dumped her and called me with all the racy details. I'm sure she exaggerated a bit, but it was enough that I knew you were having an affair. Why didn't I tell you? Well, I thought the way I chose was more weighty. I wanted you to know that pain can be two-sided." Kate paused for a moment before continuing. "As for who he was, you'll never know. That's part of your punishment." "Oh, and you won't find out if I really cheated, and if so, who it was with." "What do you mean, really cheated? I heard you two having sex. I heard you telling him how much better he was than me." "Well, yes, you did hear some things, but did it really happen, or did I just play it up to make it seem like I did? Sure, there was a guy there, but did I let him fuck me, or was it all an act? You have to ask yourself if you think I would really cheat on you, just like I had to ask myself about you. Again, this is part of the punishment. I'll never tell you what really happened. You'll just have to deal with it just like I have to deal with what you did." I didn't know what to say. I knew I had heard everything. Now she was telling me that maybe it was all an act to make me think she was cheating. How to deal with that? If I knew for sure, I could react, but not knowing really left me no choice. Kate broke into my musings, her voice softer this time. "Dave, I never said he was a better lover than you, only that he was bigger and reached places you didn't. Now, was that a lie too, or did he actually do things to me that you could never do? I had to think the same thing when Debbie told me about the two of you." I stood there shaking my head, unsure of anything. Was it all real, or was it all a bad dream? I had no answers for anything. "Dave, I love you, and I want us to stay together. But I couldn't stay with you if you didn't truly understand the pain I was going through. This was my way of solving this problem for me. We'll talk about it when you get home, but right now I have to go. I love you." She hung up before I could respond. What could I possibly say? Later we did talk. I explained everything I'd done and why. She cried a lot and then told me that she could get over it if we were both true to each other from now on. She never told me if she cheated on me or not. I begged her to tell me the truth so I could get past it, but she said it wasn't the right time. 6 months later, things were getting worse and worse. I couldn't get it out of my head, and it seemed like we were going to break up. I even refused to have sex with Kate until she produced a note from her doctor saying she didn't have an STD. She took offense at first, but I told her I wasn't going to take any chances. She finally understood and agreed. It didn't help. It wasn't the thought of her sleeping with someone else. That was something I could deal with. Much worse was the uncertainty. Eventually, I moved out of the master bedroom and into the spare room so I could have some privacy. I couldn't be in the same bed with her without getting angry. We hadn't had sex since this whole thing started. Every time a picture of her sleeping with him would pop into my head, and it would happen all over again. Kate tried to seduce me with sexy lingerie and romantic dinners, but none of it worked. Kate was desperate, but still didn't tell me. As a last resort, we both attended counseling. During the first session, the counselor convinced Kate that if we were going to work on this, she would have to tell me the truth. As he put it, it was a cruel and unfair punishment. I know it was painful for her to admit that she had indeed slept with a bastard, but it gave me the closure I needed. She didn't tell me who it was, only that I didn't know him and he wasn't dating me. "Dave, if I told you who it was, I know you'd go looking for him." "You're damn right I'm going to go looking for that asshole. And when I find him, he's going to regret ever doing it in the first place." The main thing that surprised me was how guilty Kate felt about her revenge and how much she had hurt me. That, more than anything else, convinced me that we would eventually get over this hurdle. We did move on and stayed together, eventually returning to a more normal marriage. These days, I am more attentive to Kate, and we spend more time together. She says it's because I don't trust her, but we both know it's because we don't want to risk losing each other. I had one ace up my sleeve that Kate didn't know about. She told me that I didn't know him and that he had never met me. That gave me my first clue as to who this asshole could be. It had to be someone who knew Kate was married and knew about me but hadn't met me. I knew all her friends and she knew mine, so it wasn't one of them. My next investigation led me to her workplace. It was probably someone she worked with. I had a business acquaintance who worked at the same firm as Kate, a guy I had helped a few times. He owed me, so I asked him to see if he could discreetly pick up any gossip about her and the other guy. 2 weeks later, he came back with an answer. George, one of the sales reps, had a reputation as a ladies' man, and he hung around Kate. Finally, she yelled something at him about leaving her alone, and that it would never happen again. She had done something stupid, but she wanted to save her marriage, not have an affair. "You know, Dave, if it were anyone else, I probably wouldn't tell you, but this asshole really pisses me off. He's ruined some good marriages and doesn't give a shit about the people he hurts. I knew that if I did anything, it would come back to me, and Kate would never forgive both himself and me. So I huffed for a long time. All this time, I had been keeping a close eye on the asshole and waiting for my chance. I took the opportunity to get a little revenge on Debbie. An email to her husband describing the mole she had on her left nipple and an embellished account of our tumultuous lovemaking guaranteed that she would regret her phone call to Kate. Funny how she never thought about the consequences of her actions, the fact that she had as much to lose as I did. Good things come to those who wait, and things couldn't have worked out better. To make my revenge even sweeter, it was just about the 3rd anniversary of the phone call when it finally happened. As I waited, hidden by the hibiscus bushes that grew along the driveway to the gorgeous 2-story house, it was dark and cold. It was the home of his latest mistress and her unsuspecting husband. He was having an affair with the wife of one of his firm's partners, and that made him vulnerable. I knew I was perfectly safe. He'd never met me, plus I wore a balaclava to hide my face. The cold penetrated me. To distract myself, I ran the plan through my head again. Wait until he passed me on the way to his car parked on the street. Quickly get out and grab him by the shoulder, turn him around, then punch him once in the stomach and once more in the face. After that, it would depend on his reaction. I fumbled for a piece of crumpled paper in my jacket pocket. It reassured me that everything was okay. Anger never really left me, and just thinking about this asshole reignited that anger. At least it warmed me up, chasing away the cold. The partner was in a late meeting, and when he got home, he found George beaten, bleeding, and tied up in the driveway. A printed note pinned to his shirt told of George's affair with his wife and several other women, all the affairs the bastard had had over the last year, all of them named. I stuffed all the clothes and shoes I wore into 5 different dumpsters across town. George found himself out of a job. The police had plenty of suspects among the husbands of other women, but they didn't get to me. It got into the daily papers with pictures of him being put into an ambulance. You can't keep something like that a secret, and with all the publicity, his wife found out all about it and divorced him. Kate kept quiet all week, but finally told me about what had happened to George. I asked her if he was the guy she'd gotten involved with, and she finally admitted that he was. Serves the bastard right. Too bad it wasn't me. Well, I'm glad it wasn't you. I'd hate to lose you now that we finally worked things out. Kate curled up next to me and kissed me gently on the lips. I smiled. One part of the smile was meant for her, the other part for the secret I was keeping. I screwed up big time and I paid for it. I'd finally paid it off, now I could move on with my life.